Okay, well, welcome everybody to episode 6 of When Tomorrow Comes. Joined this week by Paul Crawley from Royal Architecture. Good morning, Paul. Nice to see you.
Morning.
And just a slight digression, Paul, you'll recognise where I'm sat because I'm in my virtual nuclear bunker that you designed for me all those years ago. So presumably it's good to see it being used. Nice to see your work in action.
Yeah.
We've also got Kieran Edwards and Ashley Cook. Hi guys, you all right?
Hi.
Nice to see you all. This week we're talking under the banner of Analogue to Digital, which is obviously a broad topic, but what we were thinking is we perhaps reflect on some of the things that we have been doing over the last few years, and in many respects the lessons that we've learned along the way. And it's probably the case that some of those lessons and some of those actions have accelerated through the last 6 weeks because of the COVID shutdown. Kieran, could I just perhaps ask you to start just to provide a bit of context for this week?
Yeah, well, I mean, since joining Iceni about 3 years ago, worked quite closely with Paul on a variety of different projects through a number of different types of medium, but mostly doing a lot of film work, as well as then progressing onto websites, drones, 360 photography. And I think, you know, during that time, I've really come to see the value of using film as a medium to actually convey a message very quickly and succinctly that is much more richer and nuanced than any other form of delivery is really possible. So in terms of the engagement work that we do with communities, it's been a really effective tool for us to actually positively and constructively position a project and then move it on into a really good dialogue.
And Paul, we've worked with you for donkey's years, and your company name would suggest you're an architect. So do you want to just tell us how you found yourself moving into this sort of forum?
Well, it's essentially when you study to be an architect, a lot of what you do is about getting ideas across, really. And I think there's an awful lot of time spent doing that, because you can have the best ideas in the world, I guess, but really unless you can demonstrate those ideas, then it makes you've essentially got to bring people along with you. So I kind of guess it's just an extension of that, really, that I started working out how I could better illustrate ideas, and it just became a tool, really, that I use for my own work, but also then other people's work. So it's pretty, it's a fundamental skill, but it's also become more pertinent because we've got so much technology and so many different mediums, really, and they're essentially, a lot of it's all sat on people's hard drives. So it's how you really share that information in a sort of engaging way, I think, is the most important point.
And Ashley, is this because we're all too busy and too impatient to look at plans and spend time reading documents, and therefore we've all become sort of home to the idea of looking at things on our iPhones 6 inches from our face, typically on a busy train, but perhaps now working from home? Is that why we're now perhaps more ready to receive information in more sort of visual ways?
No, I think I disagree with that.
I'm glad I asked the question then.
I think that actually it's to do with there's a very wide audience that we're trying to reach when we're talking about development. So on the one hand, there are other planners and there are your local authorities, and there's still obviously the value in reading plans, and they're very, very important for this sort of technical documents. But like Kieran and Paul have suggested, it's about the messaging, and we've got a whole population of people out there who are very interested in development that's happening to them locally. There's maybe even more awareness now than there was before in terms of accessibility to this sort of information. So through things like film and just kind of digital displays of information, we can make sure that the population who's impacted by particular developments can actually understand what's happening. There's a possibility that if we were still in the age where it was only planned,
I think possibly the irony is that.
Go on.
Yes.
Go ahead, Paul.
Sorry, I think possibly the irony is that technology that allows us to do these things, but but at this present moment in time, I can only get every other word.
Oh.
But I think it's I guess broadband technology essentially allows you to share a lot of these things as well, and so with everybody being able to get everybody being able to access that level of information online. You know, it's only in the last few years that you, for example, can get good film quality online, and you can share those assets. So I think that's facilitated this as well.
Kieran, I've been rebuked there by Ashley for asking a leading question, which is fair enough. Do you want to perhaps give us give us an example of how we've used this, and back to that point, lessons learned, what's gone well, what perhaps still needs to be looked at?
Yeah, well, I at the moment, I think we're experimenting with quite a lot of things. I think the things that have worked particularly well have been in previous years, has been working closely with Paul to actually create video elements that we've used in different settings. We have to use them in public settings, but also with kind of key stakeholders. And it's an amazing thing. We're so used to film and some of these other technologies, obviously we're becoming more and more commonplace and used to them. But the thing about film is everybody's very conditioned to how to watch it. So if you put it on in a crowded room, say you've got a public meeting, and you start a film, 1.5 minute, 2 minute long film, you can guarantee that everybody will go quiet and sit and watch it. If you stood in front of that same audience for 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes presenting, very rarely will you get the same level of quiet or attention from everybody in that room. And it's just because over the last sort of century, we've become conditioned to actually, okay, the room goes dark, something comes on, we sit, we quietly watch it, we consume it, and then we move on to the next bit. And I think that's the real kind of strength for some of these tools. And certainly a lesson that I've learned is it's a great way to begin a conversation where everybody starts on the same page because they've all listened and watched it. I think what's, again, some of the other stuff that we've been doing, myself and Paul have worked on I always call it my feel-good project, which is the Illuminated River project to light all the bridges. And we've done a vast amount of documentation that is becoming invaluable now during this period, where although the project is still proceeding, we still have guys beginning survey work on the next 5 bridges. What we've actually begun to use our material for is to keep communities engaged and try and play our role and help give something back to the people that we've worked with for the past 3 years. So now we've got this Friday afternoon, we've got our first Zoom art class with kids of 9 years and above. So people actually, there's an artist leading that class. We're providing colouring in of templates of the bridges that we produced as well. But we've also done things like, we've done infomercials that have been shown at London Bridge to actually capture commuters. Obviously that was before the lockdown. And very recently, the last couple of Thursdays, and in fact it's happening now, Paul has helped us to, because obviously not many people can see this, but the bridges have been joining the clap for the NHS on Thursday evenings, and all the bridges have been turning blue on Thursday evenings. So
that's all, you know, if I'm a hard-nosed, cynical developer with a limited budget, Ashley, how does that help me get planning permission?
Well, I think it helps them to communicate the sort of passion and the vision behind the idea, behind what they're doing. Like Kieran said, the Illuminated River, obviously, this is a really positive project, but it's one that nevertheless did have some stumbling blocks along the way. But the way that the message was communicated and the engagement with the community and with the sort of visual materials that was provided, I can say that that is a good example of something that was helpful in selling a scheme to the wider population and to the planning department equally. So I think that it's just about the messaging, it's about showing how you can have a positive impact, and film and sort of digital media in the end is something that is potentially more easier for people to understand than seeing plans where they're just worrying about the sort of number or the scale of development.
And just to add to that,
go on, Kieran, sorry.
Just to add to that, and I won't then mention the borough, but we are having certain challenges to get through planning conditions to maintain our programme. So doing this positive engagement with their communities is actually helping us convince members behind the officers to then exert a little bit of influence on them. So I think that there are a variety of reasons why a hard-nosed developer might want to actually consider certain generosity towards things, because it does shift opinion, and it can often be the small things in the planning process that actually really matter to help that decision over the line.
Paul, you've got a remarkable armory of skills. So I always think that, you know, bear in mind you're a trained architect, but you also you know, you have your drone license, you build websites, you help out with the engagement activities, you do the face-to-face filming with communities. What have you learned along the way? You know, what would your thoughts, what would your tips be or advice be when for the same hard-nosed developer?
I think it starts with a good brief. You always need to know, you know, you need to know what your you know, very often people say, "Oh, we'd like a film," and then you go, "Okay, but what? You know, who's it aimed at?" And I think that's the really key issue, is to know exactly what who you're aiming the film at, or any medium at. But I think it's there's an element of creativity as well that you know that you also, it's also, I know some people maybe shy away from that and think it's a little bit less technical, but I think ultimately what you really want is to produce something that's engaging. So, you know, you're often dealing with quite pragmatic subjects or quite technical subjects, and I think it's the way that you can bring those projects or processes to life in a way that's engaging. And so obviously, so it's universal, so anybody can understand it, but it's not condescending, and it's not and it's also yeah, I suppose that's essentially it. So it engages with people, and gets people. You know, I think people are typically very cynical about a lot of these processes. So I think certainly through film, what people can very quickly see is that you can demonstrate a real love for a project, you know, and a real interest in it, a real genuine interest. And I think that's very commonly said about film, but it's dreadful for fact, but it's brilliant for emotion. And I think that's a really important point, because you can portray really important elements of a scheme using film. And of course, all these things are very universal, so you can essentially you know, move sideways with websites or photography or virtual reality. It's all sort of all connected, really.
Kieran, how much is this telling communities what we're going to do to them, as opposed to getting feedback on how we're going to improve projects? How does the film change that?
Because it gets them more directly involved in it. I think you know, one of the challenges is always attracting people to events, trying to get a good spread of different age groups involved in different things. And things like film and some of the work that we've done in the past week with Paul around virtual site tours is really, I think, the stuff that younger people are more likely to actually take notice of it, and to actually really kind of become more interested in the project and then delve deeper. I mean, I was going to say that, you know, quite often when we're working on an existing building or a site with existing buildings, you know, one of the key things that we offer doing public consultation events can be things like site tours, and the value of those, because people often have been living next to these sites. Thinking of some of the gaswork sites that I work on, they live on next to these sites, but they've never actually been on. You know, they've never stepped foot on it. So they'll be aware of certain things by peeping over the wall, but they've never actually really kind of had the opportunity, because most of these things have been private and locked away. So doing public consultation events, taking people on site tours has always been a great hook to get a wider diversity of people actually into your event. And it's that kind of that gateway then to move them on to actually talking to them about the proposals, and then for them to positively engage with it as well. Even those that may be arriving at the event with already a preconception of what it is and an already fixed point of view. Again, these kind of softer techniques to actually at least warm them up to it can then allow much more constructive feedback and that can actually influence the designs. So what we've been doing over the recent week is actually trying to work out how we now move that into an online world when that person-to-person contact is much more restricted. And hopefully, possibly by the time this has come out, we'll have a new website launched for a project, Holloway Prison, which will combine some of these elements. So it's got a very detailed site tour, where the brief to Paul was very much about, this is about recreating an experience that people last summer, when the consultation was happening last summer, were actually very engaged with and really enjoying. And so we've tried to recreate that. It's not a faithful site tour, as in moving from space to space, linear ways. It's something that's more focused around the experience of getting them to know what is quite an amazing building with some really great social history. So the brief there was not about, for instance, it wasn't about showing a planning officer the boundary conditions and things like that. We're not interested in that. It was more about getting people involved in the online consultation.
Okay, well, that's quite a nice segue to a question I was going to put to Ashley, because we started by sort of saying about lessons learned. Kieran's probably brought us up to the present. So with your Iceni Futures cap on, Ashley, what are the things that we should be anticipating as we go forward?
Well, I think that the talk about the virtual site visits is something that obviously we're hearing a lot more about. It's something that we ourselves have recently launched with Eyesight, but it's also something that I think barristers and local authorities are becoming aware that that's something that they need to be considering, and it's type of evidence that they may have to learn how to understand and to interpret as part of their sort of planning considerations. So I think that the use of drones and use of kind of video technology to assess sites and to display information is just one thing that we're going to have to become more familiar with. But I also think the use of digital platforms for sharing of information and for coordinating on projects as well is going to be hugely significant. And I know that a lot of people use this already, but I think that in our industry there's kind of an unequal use of it, whereby maybe certain consultants will use this for their internal documents and vice versa. I think across projects, that sharing of information on a digital platform where everyone has access to the same, things can be updated live and edited live by many people. I think that's a new reality that we're living in, and certainly something that I imagine a lot of people will have been using in the past few months, just because we've been working from home. So I think they're two of the things that would benefit us in our work, but also think are things that probably local authorities need to kind of have their eyes open to a little bit more as well.
And Paul, just sort of drawing this to a close, I'm conscious that people like me sit around telling people to make use of this technology, and then we sort of take for granted that there are the people out there with the skill set to do the drone photography, to build the websites, to come up with this technology. From your perspective, are there the skills out there, or are we going to have to wait for people to gain these skills before we can really put these ideas into action?
Yeah, the skills are already there. I think it's working out how to use them. You know, yeah, I think all the technology is there. It's just using it in a coordinated way and in a way that essentially just draws a lot of important points together. So it's one of those things, isn't it? I think anybody can take a photograph on their phone, but what do they do with it? It just stays in your phone forever. And I think it's the same with a lot of technology that you can. There's a proliferation of technology, and but it's really how you use it. And I think what's happened, for example, with Eyesight, is it's a way of drawing all that together and making it really, really useful.
So I think probably just to bring it to a close, and thanks for all your contributions. One thought for me is that when we talk about analog to digital, it's more than just a statement. It's a process you have to fully commit to and be digital across all of those platforms. Otherwise, you're not connecting up different strands of information. So thank you for your contributions today, guys. And thank you for everybody that's watched this, and look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks a lot, guys.
Cheers, Ian.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.